Good evening and welcome to beautiful Fort DeSoto Park in Pinellas County. I'm Storm Team 8 Chief Meteorologist Steve Jervy. These beaches are ranked some of the best in the nation, but it's also a place where severe storms and hurricanes meet land for the first time. Fort DeSoto's beaches stretch across more than 5 islands along the Pinellas coastline. It's part of Florida's chain of barrier islands encircling the state and protecting the mainland. Our Gulf Coast beaches consistently rank among the best in the world. And it's no wonder, with white sand, abundant wildlife, and sunshine all year long. But when a hurricane hits, the beach and coastline is the last place on earth you want to be. Even with a storm well offshore, conditions can deteriorate rapidly.
And it's getting closer, so we're expecting these winds to continue to pick up, these waves continuing to get larger as we head on through the next couple hours, with hurricane conditions expected here in only a few hours.
The Gulf or seashore is hurricane ground zero. The fury of a hurricane creates the greatest impact. But even well inland, there can be devastating effects. Storm surge and rain produce flooding, and wind can bring down power lines and trees, sometimes at the cost of human life.
Waves were breaking over those rocks there. It was scary.
Last fall, Hurricane Hermine churned up Bay Area beaches before making landfall in the Panhandle. And soon after, Matthew grazed the East Coast. The shoreline is not the place you want to be when tropical storms are headed your way. So make plans well ahead of time to evacuate to a safe location. In 2016, Hermine was the first hurricane to make landfall in Florida in 11 years, and it happened right here on the Gulf Coast. Storm Team 8 began tracking Hermine in late August as it formed in the Florida Straits and began to move northward off the Florida west coast.
Here's a look at Tropical Storm Hermine. Again, it's a very large storm extending from Jacksonville almost all the way down to Cancun, Mexico.
The storm became more organized, strengthening to a Category 1 hurricane with 80-mile-per-hour winds just before making landfall in the Panhandle September 2nd. But even as a tropical storm, it caused serious damage along the Gulf Coast. Flooding in Pinellas and Pasco counties destroyed 7 homes and damaged nearly 2,000 others. Winds are blamed for knocking out power to about 325,000 customers, including 80% of Tallahassee. The coastal community of Cedar Key in Levy County was one of the hardest hit areas.
It was pretty bad. I don't think we expected the surge to be what it was.
In all, Hermine caused about $550 million in damage in the United States and caused 1 death. This year, hurricane experts are making a push to use drone aircraft like this one to assess storm damage. Our own Drone 8 was ahead of the curve when it flew over storm damage caused by a deadly tornado in Sarasota County. Like a freight train, 2 tornadoes struck in the early morning hours early last year. One killed a husband and wife in Parrish. Another came ashore in Siesta Key.
Next thing I knew, I was up on top of the roof.
The tornadoes also caused millions in property damage. For the first time, Drone 8 took off for some more detailed aerial images. Pilot Peter Bernard was able to move in closer, getting clear views of the roof damage of homes and condos on Midnight Pass Road and over areas that were off limits to photographers on the ground. This is how FEMA will use drones in the future to assess damage and in rescue efforts.
I'm Storm Team 8 meteorologist Ian Oliver. We are inside the clean room giving you a sneak peek of the GOES-R weather satellite. It's going to revolutionize weather observation and forecasting. We'll show you it coming up.
We'll have more on surviving the storm coming up. Tropical storm forecasting has entered a new era with the recent launch of sophisticated satellite technology. Meteorologist Ian Oliver took a trip over to the Space Coast for an up-close look at the next generation of satellites, GOES-R.
A high-tech tool starting an important journey.
And liftoff of NOAA's GOES-R.
Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite, or GOES-R, left Earth back in November on a 20-year mission to track the skies above us.
Control, your response looks good.
This is NASA video of an Atlas V rocket carrying GOES-R into space. The satellite is now in geostationary orbit more than 22,000 miles above us. GOES satellites have provided telling snapshots of the atmosphere above us since the mid-1970s.
And if you think about how much has changed just in your smartphone alone, that we have these, and 10 years ago we didn't, And now with GOES-R and the evolution of the development of this satellite and its technology, it's leaps and bounds ahead.
We had the opportunity to see it up close and personal in a NASA clean room just before it was prepared for launch.
GOES-R is a monumental leap forward for weather observation and forecasting. This satellite will send back images of the atmosphere above us, 4 times better resolution than the current generation. That's like going from a tube TV to an HD television. Not only that, it'll send the images back 5 times faster.
We're also flying a lightning mapper for the first time. A lightning mapper is basically a giant camera that's taking an image every 200 times a second so that we can see the entire lightning field across the United States.
The new data sent back will help meteorologists make more accurate forecasts for both the track and intensity of tropical cyclones.
When we can now say, for that hurricane, I can watch it every 30 seconds with that fine resolution, and now with the lightning, they'll be able to much more precisely know not only where it's going, but what intensity levels that it's going to have.
And then the ability to take smaller sectors and scan those at 30 seconds to a minute interval. You'll be able to see eye wall formation and regeneration.
Now operational, the satellite is called GOES-16. Ian Oliver, News Channel 8.
A slosh model is a computerized way for forecasters to predict storm surge. As Lee Spann explains, it's one of several methods used to determine the strength and severity of coastal flooding.
That's right. This year, the National Hurricane Center will be using and issuing a few new maps, and the first one is based on that slosh model. This is the first year that storm surge watches and warnings will officially be issued. Now, a watch would be issued 48 hours before the possibility of storm surge, and warnings would be in place 36 hours before. This is actually a look at Hurricane Hermine's storm surge warning. The products will be separate from wind watches and warnings, and they're meant to protect people under a significant risk of life-threatening surge. The next map the National Hurricane Center will be issuing actually 2 experimental graphics this year. One that shows the earliest time an area could feel tropical storm force winds, and the other map would show the most likely time for tropical storm force winds to arrive. Now on this example, you can see that the Tampa Bay area should feel tropical storm force winds Thursday at 8 a.m. Now this is important because all preparation should be finished for a storm before winds hit that 39 mile per hour threshold. Hopefully these maps will encourage people to get those preps done early. And finally, new this year, the Hurricane Center now has the option to issue watches, warnings, and advisories for tropical systems before they develop into a tropical depression. Now, this would only happen if the system poses a threat to land within 48 hours, and they would be called potential tropical cyclones. And finally, due to increased accuracy of tropical forecasts, the so-called cone of uncertainty is going to be a little bit smaller this year. The idea with all of these new products is to give you the most information possible so you can make safe choices for your family.
Forecasters at Colorado State University anticipate a less active hurricane season with 11 named storms, 4 of them becoming hurricanes and 2 of those becoming major hurricanes. But remember, it only takes one storm in your area to threaten your life and property, so be prepared. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Surviving the Storm. They're small but mighty. A new NASA mission uses 8 microsatellites to take accurate measurements near the eye of a storm. Storm teammates Ed Bloodsworth shows us more on Cygnus.
And drop Pegasus is away. Ignition of the Pegasus rocket with Cygnus.
And with that, the work of a new class of weather satellites began.
All of a sudden, in 10 minutes, we were up there, they turned on, they started working, and it was real. It was really amazing.
Cygnus is an acronym, and it stands for Cyclone Global Navigation Satellite System. It sounds complicated, but the goal is simple.
The immediate goal is to make measurements of the winds in the center of hurricanes for the first time. It hasn't been done before from satellites. We needed to be able to penetrate through the heavy rain, and we needed to be able to make the measurements more often. And this technique that Cygnus uses enables both of those features.
The project is a collection of 8 microsatellites, each one no larger than an airline carry-on suitcase. These satellites, which will orbit the tropics for at least 2 years, will work in tandem with GPS satellites to more frequently measure winds near a hurricane's core. This data will be incorporated into current forecast models in order to more accurately predict how strong a hurricane will become. The aim, according to Dr. Ruff, is to give people a better idea of what to expect the next time a hurricane threatens.
I hope that we're going to make a kind of a psychological impact, because once the forecasts are more reliable, people will tend to believe them more.
For Storm Team 8, I'm meteorologist Ed Bloodsworth.
At Fort DeSoto, these fortifications and mortars were built to protect the coastline from enemies. Do you have a plan to protect your home and family from a storm? News Channel 8's Julie Phillips shows us the best ways to do that.
Nothing beats a view like this. But during hurricane season, living on the water in Florida is a risk. At Tampa Bay Watch, an environmental nonprofit, they showcase the latest hurricane fortifications. Founder Peter Clark explains how vulnerable this structure is, being so close to the Gulf.
Because of that, we had to create a facility that was going to be able to withstand the majority of the storms so that we didn't have to come back and rebuild the property.
All of the buildings here are built to withstand a Category 3 storm and rest on stilts, so storm surge won't affect the structure.
We've had 3 different levels of construction, and they've all been about 5 years apart.
The original building is about 15 feet above sea level. 10 years later, new construction codes meant this one had to be raised to 17 feet.
The buildings here at Tampa Bay Watch aren't just elevated from top to bottom, they're built to withstand a hurricane. For instance, this is hardy plank, a mix of wood and concrete that's impact resistant.
Pilings plunge 40 feet deep to keep the building from blowing over.
Not only to go in the ground, but they go all the way up through the buildings and tie into the roof. So the roof is anchored all the way through the building as well.
Windows here are bulletproof and built to withstand 130-mile-per-hour winds. The doors have 3-point locking systems. Even the garage door is reinforced. Even with all these precautions, it's best to have an evacuation plan. Julie Phillips, Storm Team 8.
Now is the time to put together your hurricane survival kit. Here's what you need: 1 gallon of water per person per day for at least 3 days, a 3-day supply of non-perishable food, a battery-powered or hand-crank radio, and a NOAA weather radio, flashlights, extra batteries, a manual can opener, a wrench or pliers, and cell phones with chargers. We'll have more on surviving the storm after the break. Hurricane Matthew was a late-season, long-lasting, and destructive tropical cyclone that moved north up Florida's east coast. Storm Team 8 gave an all-out effort to cover every aspect of this mammoth hurricane. Matthew became a hurricane just north of Venezuela and quickly grew to a Category 5 storm as it made its way north. It was a powerful, deadly storm that made landfall in Haiti and Cuba as a Category 4. Then it headed straight for Florida.
That's the Max Defender view over almost 300 miles away of the actual eye wall itself, moving toward the Bahamas. When we add our weather network in there using Miami Doppler radar, you can see the center of the system itself and all the showers coming rapidly around.
Fortunately, the storm just brushed Florida's east coast.
We did expect these conditions to get into the tropical storm force range through the afternoon, so I can tell you we're already there.
The governor declared a state of emergency and issued mandatory evacuations.
Evacuate, evacuate, evacuate.
Jim Hood and his family were among 1.5 million Floridians who evacuated. He, like many, escaped to Tampa Bay.
That's the reason we left, basically. We're far enough away from the coast that we weren't really concerned too much with storm surge, but wind and losing power.
Matthew gradually weakened as it moved up the Atlantic coast before finally making landfall as a Category 1 near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. In all, 603 people died as a result of Matthew. Haiti suffered the worst, with 546 deaths. 47 died in the United States. Matthew was also the costliest Atlantic hurricane since Sandy in 2012, with damages of more than $15 billion. NOAA hurricane hunters played a vital role in tracking Matthew's path. News Channel 8's Jeff Patterson flew on a mission above, around, and ahead of Matthew in order to chart its progress.
This Gulfstream jet is nicknamed Gonzo NOAA scientists and the flight crew are dedicated to predicting the path of hurricanes and invited me on board to see their mission. For takeoff, I sat in front to see pilots who routinely fly into weather that others avoid. It's a job this entire team takes very seriously.
There's not a lot of jobs out there where you can go home after a day of work and really feel like you've made a difference in people's lives.
We flew across Florida to the Bahamas, down to Haiti, over Jamaica, around Cuba, and then back up to the Florida Panhandle.
Everything's looking good.
Along the way, the crew drops measuring devices called dropsondes at predetermined points to collect information.
When they're released, they will descend to the surface of the ocean and collect temperature, humidity, wind speed, direction, and pressure 4 times a second, all the way down.
The information gathered here will help predict the path of Matthew, but also improve computer modeling for future storms.
We are really glad we're able to do this, and we're very proud of the work we do, and we just hope that we get the right data to the people who can make the right decisions and get the right people out of the way.
During the flight, I interviewed the crew about their jobs as we cruised at 40 to 45,000 feet above the storm. They allowed me to release one of the dropsondes.
So this is the drop switch.
The information is used to generate the cone that we are now all familiar with. It shows the potential path of a storm. The NOAA hurricane hunters know that path is critical.
And it's very complex because when you think about making sure the right people leave, the flip side of that is making sure the right people don't leave. Because as you know, when you start evacuating people that later find out they didn't need to, that has a negative impact on the future that we have to work on.
This team's goal is to help improve forecasting, to make sure the right people are evacuated at the right time to potentially save lives. Jeff Patterson, News Channel 8.
Fort DeSoto was built to defend Tampa Bay. This year, Storm Team 8 added a new, advanced, and powerful piece of equipment to add to our storm tracking toolbox. Our exclusive, Max Defender 8.
Yeah, watching local effects here on Max Defender 8, you can clearly just see that eye off of the Indian River County coastline.
Max Defender 8 went online just in time for Storm Team 8 to track Hurricane Matthew.
Let's first of all take a look at Max Defender 8, and you can see exactly where the center of the system is located. It detects the actual eye of the storm. We have a much better range with this S-band million-watt Doppler radar. We're very excited to be using it.
Max Defender 8's powerful reach stretched clear to the Atlantic Ocean, showing us the direction and intensity of the storm in a way we've never been able to do until now. This 1 million watt S-band high-frequency weather radar is the most powerful and advanced in the nation. It's the right tool for the right job, tracking storms right here in Tampa Bay and across the region. For decades, the use of S-band weather radars has been limited to the National Weather Service only. This technology has only recently been approved for private use by the United States government.
The rain, the thunderstorms, hail cores, and there's all sorts of things you can see using those S-band radars. They're really fantastic.
We chose Riverview in central Hillsborough County as the spot to build Max Defender 8. Construction began early in 2016.
We started with a mass excavation for the foundation for the tower itself.
A tall tower with a bulky base to make sure Max Defender 8 can not only track strong storms with powerful winds into the Tampa Bay area, but also stand up to them once they arrive.
Everything has to withstand the storm, so the foundation, the reason it's that thick and that heavy and that deep is to make sure that the tower itself is properly supported.
With any luck, that is one test Max Defender 8 won't have to take. But if a big storm or hurricane comes our way, this tower will be ready to take it. We want to thank you for joining us tonight, and a reminder, you can survive a storm. Whether you stay or evacuate, have a plan and stick to it. From beautiful Fort DeSoto Park in Pinellas County, good night.